Okay, this is going to be a fun video. We're going to take this Scorpions cassette tape and we're going to completely disassemble it so you can see what it looks like on the inside. I was a huge Scorpions fan back in the 1980s. As a matter of fact, I saw them on this tour, and this was one of my favorite album covers ever too. I thought this was so cool. I loved it so much. I actually, in one of my art classes in, I don't know, junior high or something, I actually painted this picture. My version was terrible, but I just absolutely love this stuff. I love the music. This is one of my, I think this is one of the greatest hard rock / heavy metal albums to come out of the 1980s. And it was so great. This album cover was so good. Every single song on here, and you can see the track list right here. Blackout, the way the album started with that song was incredible. I mean, Klaus's voice is so good. Can't Live Without You, great song. No One Like You I think that might have been the first Scorpion song I ever heard, and it just was this powerful, just a powerful song. You Give Me All I Need was a great song. Now, just awesome. Dynamite was a great song. Arizona was a great song. Arizona kind of changed it up a little bit. It had a little bit more of a major key kind of feel to it. It was a great tune. China White kind of got into that plodding, almost Led Zeppelin type of slow bluesy feel to it. When the Smoke Is Going Down, slows it down at the end of this tape. I mean, it was great. I have this on vinyl, but I was at a record store not long ago and I found the cassette and I thought this would be really fun to make a video just taking it apart and looking at the inside of, seeing what these things look like on the inside. So a lot of these tapes that were manufactured by record companies were held together with some sort of glue. And so even though there's two halves of it, and you can see the line right there, how that was stuck together, it's not made to come apart. But it really did have, and a lot of tapes that you would buy way back when, let me see if I have one. This is one of our test tapes here in the studio. But you'll see right there that it has these screws, and that makes it easy to open up. And what we do here at the studio, hey, hold on for just a second, we'll get right back to the video. But if you like this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we really, really appreciate it. Anyway, with that, back to the video. People send in cassette tapes to digitize for them. Now, not this kind, we don't do copyrighted tapes, but tapes like things from churches and government agencies and people's family recordings and things like that. And a lot of times we have to open them up to fix the tape because these things just don't necessarily age very well depending on where you live and how it's stored and that kind of thing. And so a lot of times, especially these tapes that were manufactured by record companies, were super, super cheap, made cheap, glued together. Sometimes these little pads fall off, and I have a bunch of videos where I show you what to do about that. But if we get one, because a lot of tapes that you would buy at the store that were these kind, were glued together. And then when we get them, we have to break into them to make the fix. And so that's what I'm gonna show you here, is how we would normally break into a cassette tape so that we can access the parts inside and fix things if necessary. Because what'll happen sometimes, and I'll show you this, when somebody's playing the tape, the older the tape, excuse me, the older the tape gets, a couple different things will happen. That little pad right there will fall off. I'll move this so you can see it. This little pad that's on that little copper mount will fall off, and then the tape won't sound as good because that pad plays a really important role in when a tape is being played, your tape deck, when you push play, what it does is the playhead in the tape deck literally moves into place like this and pushes on the tape to get a nice solid connection. That pad on the other side is what helps keep it pressed up against the playhead so it gets a nice signal. And a lot of times these tapes, that pad falls off just over time because it's just glued on, and the adhesive will break down. And then the other thing that happens, and this is where the kind of thing more often where we have to open up the tape. Right here, you'll see this kind of pale blue transparent thing, and this is called the leader tape. And on this side, we have the oxide tape. And this is, I think, ferric oxide. It's a type of iron, and that's what holds the magnetic data signal that gets read by the playhead. Well, these two are attached by a little piece of, basically it's a piece of adhesive, it's a piece of tape. And you can see one end of it right there through the transparent leader tape. And I'll flip it over so you can kind of see a little bit better. And on the opposite side, you'll see that spans the two pieces. And really all this is, when this cassette tape was manufactured, those things were literally adhered together. That's basically just a little piece of tape. Tape meaning like Scotch tape, if you will, that kind of thing. And that's what holds it together. So what'll happen a lot of times is we'll get tapes in the studio where that adhesive, if you've ever seen a piece of Scotch tape that's been sitting for 30 years, it just flakes off. And depending on how it's been stored, what the polymer of the tape was, etc., it just breaks down over time. And that happens a lot with these tapes. And so we will get tapes sent into us where somebody's played it and the leader tape has gone to this side and the oxide's gone to that side. There's no way to get in there without busting it open. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna just show you how we would normally do something like that. So this tape, you may or may not realize this, but these holes that are up here at the top of the cassette, these are what we call write protection holes. So when you put a tape in, because you could record on cassette tapes, which was one of the benefits of having cassette tapes, one of the things that made them so popular. Whenever they would sell these things, they didn't want you, obviously, to record over it on accident. And so there was a little fail-safe put in place in cassette tapes, and it was these holes right here. And I think this one corresponds to side A, and this one corresponds to side B. I don't remember that for sure, but what happens is when you put the tape in, let's say that we put the tape in the tape deck and we go to close it like this, there's a little kind of a button, if you will, that just sits there in the tape deck. And when you close the tape, the button pops into that little hole. And what that does is it signals the tape deck to disable the record button. So as long as that's right there, as long as that's an open hole, that button will go down into it whenever you play the tape, and that will stop you from recording over it. Now, you could take this tape and record right over it if you wanted to, and a lot of people did, and all you would have to do is take a piece of, you do something like this, take a piece of tape like that and just put it over and then put it in the tape deck, and it'll act like a tape you bought at the store to record on. It'll record over everything. And a lot of people did that. So anyway, so I'm going to show you now what we would normally do. And the way we would access this is we actually utilize those two spots initially to see if we can break the seal. Now I've tried so many different things over the years, and these we have mixed results with the glued together tapes. Sometimes they can come apart in one piece, or what I mean in two pieces, and they come apart nicely, and other times we end up just destroying the thing. The good news is we have boxes and boxes of like empty shells like this for cassette tapes, so that if you send a tape in and we have to tear it apart to get the tape out, it really doesn't impact the tape at all, because we just take it out, set it in another housing, and it works fine. So that's never really an issue. But I'll show you what we normally do. We'll take a screwdriver like so, and we'll put it in here. Well, actually, the first thing we do is we kind of just twist it a little bit and see if we can get it to crack. See if we can get the seam to crack. That one's not going to. So, because sometimes we can get the seam to just do an initial crack around the edge, and then that makes it a little easier and do this. And I don't know what's going to happen, because I haven't done this tape, but I've done, I personally, myself, I don't know about some of the other people who worked here, but I mean, I've done literally thousands of these tapes, tearing them apart, getting in here and fixing them. I mean, so many. Because we've had this business, Audio Mover, for 25 years now. So I've done this a lot. So we'll put a screwdriver in there, and then we try to just see if we can muscle it. And sometimes in this screwdriver it might not be strong enough. You can hear a little crack. Yeah, and that screwdriver may not give us the leverage that we need. There we go. You can hear it crack, and you can see right there that I broke that seam a little bit. Yeah, it's gonna take a little doing to get this one done. And if you can get it to crack just a little bit, sometimes then you can get another screwdriver wedged in there. But I mean, this is kind of, in some cases, just a little bit of brute force to get these things open. Boy, this one's tough. May have to. There we go. So I've got a little bit of a crack right there. We've got it started. You can see that we've got it started there a little bit. Let me see if I can get another screwdriver in there. It looks like this seams can be hard. I've even taken razor blades and things and tried to cut along here, and there's no real great way of doing this. And you'll see that I just cracked it right there, and this is not going to follow the seam. That's very, very common, sadly. But so then I'm going to put this in there without, try not to damage the tape. And generally speaking, I'll never play this tape again. We're just showing this for demo purposes. But generally speaking, you want to use screwdrivers that don't have like this one. This one is magnetic, and you don't necessarily want to use a magnetic screwdriver because in theory, and actually in practice, if you get a magnet too close to the tape, because this is all magnetic, it's a magnetic signal basically saved on iron, it can actually damage it. If you had a strong enough magnet, it would destroy everything on the recording, on the tape. So when you do this, you generally don't want to, and I'm not being super careful today simply because, like I said, I think we picked this up at a record store just to make a video. It's not really a big deal. But normally when we do this, we don't use magnetic screwdrivers. I don't think this one is, but anyway, like I said, I'm being a little less cautious. Boy, I loved the Scorpions so much. They were produced by a guy. Oh, there we go. You can see what we've done now. We've gotten it open that far, and then usually along the inside here, that part right there where you can see the connection isn't necessarily glued together the same way. In some cases, it doesn't seem to be glued at all when we've worked on some of these tapes. So now I'm cracking it right there. You'll see that opened up a little more easily. And now that one, I don't know if that's going to follow the seam or not. Anyway, you have to be, just like I said, a little bit careful that you don't damage the tape on the inside. And just keep working at it. And this one's going to give me a little trouble because it's not following the seam. I'm going to see if I can get that side. I'm going to try that again because it would make this a little easier if this side would pop. Man, that is a little challenging. Oh, this is the one that's magnetized. I don't think the other was. But it's also a bigger screwdriver, so I'm going to try it. There it goes. Yeah, like I said, this is but see, you'll see it's not following the seam. Now, as I said a minute ago, this doesn't really matter because we can get, we've got so many cassette housings here that we can literally lift it out and put it in another one, and it won't make a difference. And we're pretty careful about we're not going to damage the tape on the inside, so there won't be any sort of a problem with that. So there we go. Getting through that. There we go. It just popped a little bit more. So now I think I have the bottom part. You'll see that I've got that opened up. This one's moderately challenging. It's not that bad. Some of the tapes we've done, as you can imagine, we've had tapes that they were so painful. I mean, some just, like the whole housing has just been completely destroyed in the process of opening it up. There we go. Okay, we are almost there. See how that's working? And actually, that's not that bad. We'll be able to, if we wanted to put this back together, you could put this back together and it'll work fine. There wasn't that much damage done to it, and that's what it looks like on the inside, right there. And so, anyway, let me show you what's going on in here. Like I said, you can take these things and just lift them right out. Looks like when I was using the screwdriver, I might have dinged the leader tape. The leader, we're not so super careful on the side with the leader tape. When we do this, by the way, one of the things we'll do is rewind it all the way to one side, and then that's the side we'll usually really try to work on that side first to see if we can break that open, because then the screwdriver is not really in danger of touching the other. You'll see that this is perfectly clean on this side, other than a couple little pieces of plastic, but this didn't get dinged or anything. And that's kind of the goal. The leader makes really no difference at all if that gets dinged. So you will rewind it completely to one side, and then that's the best side to start working on if you can. And you can't always, like I said, it all kind of depends. All these tapes are different. But on the inside here, like I said, the reels just pull out, and if we needed to, we could take these two reels and just set them in another housing and it'd play fine. You'd never know the difference, at least listening to it. So that's kind of a nice thing. So I'm just going to set these aside for a second and then show you the rest of this. So on the inside of any cassette tape, you're going to find a few different things. There's this little sheet. I've heard it called a few different things. A slip sheet. I've always referred to it as kind of a gasket. But this little sheet here serves a couple of purposes. And you'll see that there's one on both sides here. And what happens is, as the tape sits in here, it keeps it from rubbing against the shell, the white plastic here that the tape is sitting in. And so it puts this little sheet here, which basically is very, very low friction, and it helps the tape be able to just move really smoothly as it's spinning here. But you also notice one other thing about it. You'll see these little dimples. And you'll see this done in a whole bunch of different ways. What these little dimples do is they actually help the tape, see if you can see it a little more easily there with a little contrast. What they do is they help the tape spool up smoothly like that. And what I mean is, because the tape is just kind of floating in there, what you don't want to do is have the tape kind of come off the reel. And so when you set these things in there, this little bit of these little dimples, which gives just a little bit of pressure up and down, sitting in the shell here. You know, there's up, there's down. They keep the tape really, really kind of tight. And it makes it spool on there as smoothly as possible, reducing the risk that the tape is going to come off of the reel inside the shell. And actually, we're going to make a video later today of a tape that we bought where you can see that the tape came off the shell, and it's another one we're going to have to break open and then replace the oxide, because it actually came off the reel inside the tape. That happens. And we deal with this stuff, again, all the time. So that's one of the things you'll see. A couple other things that are kind of interesting in here is you'll see that there's these little wheels right here. There's two of them, 1, 2. And in this case, see if you can, let me lean it up so you can see it. They have these little metal posts. That's a little piece of metal. And a lot of times, and it's basically just kind of jammed into a little hole right there. A lot of times they will actually have that little post as part of the plastic. It'll be part of the plastic injection mold that made the tape originally. But in this case, they do that little hole, they put this piece of metal, and then they put the wheel like so. And then these wheels, you can see, spin freely. And they just help the tape as it moves smoothly through just the whole mechanism here. Now, the other thing you'll see is there's this little piece of like metal right there, and it sits in that spot. Now what that piece of metal is, it's basically a magnetic shield. And as you think about when you play a tape, So let's say that the tape's coming through there and the playhead and the tape deck goes up like this. There's literally a little magnetic field being generated right there. And as we said a minute ago, when we have a screwdriver like this, the one that's magnetized, you don't want to get it really close to the tape or even touching it, because it can theoretically potentially damage the audio. Well, similarly here, you have there's a little magnetic field that's being generated here, and you not only play here, but you record on here, and there's a little head right next to it. If you open up a tape deck, you'll see it. There's another little head that's the erase head. And it's literally, when you hit record, it erases the tape right as it's recording onto it. So there's a whole separate head made for the purpose of erasing the tape before you record another thing onto it. A lot of people didn't realize this, that when you would record over a cassette tape, without that erase head, you would just keep recording on the same tracks over and over and over, just keep making more and more noise on it. The reason that it erased everything and replaced it was because there was a little head in there as you'd hit record that would literally create this little magnetic field and erase the audio as it was coming across this space right there. And so because it's that little magnetic field is being generated right there, we have this magnetic shield, which theoretically protects the audio tape up in this area from getting damaged by the magnetic field that's being generated there. Last thing, I talked about this before. This is what's called a pressure pad and a pressure pad mount. And it's a little piece of copper, and that little piece of felt sits on top of it, and it sits right in. See if I can get it right. There's a little spot, and it just floats in there. And when you put the shell over the top, you can't really move it out of there, because you see that little hook on either side. It just sets in that spot. So now, when you push play on the tape, then the head goes up like this, pushes on there just ever so slightly, but that's what gives it that little bit of. I just bumped it out of place. It gives it that little bit of pressure. See how it works right there? So as the tape plays, there's that little bit of pressure to keep a solid connection to the playhead. And that's what's on the inside of these tapes. And like I said, if we have to break them open, this is what it looks like. And this one will easily be put back together, and then and I'll show you how we put it back together. And then you could really go take this tape and go play it again, and it'll work just fine. And so again, these really are just a matter of just sitting in place. I don't want these little chunks of plastic. You know what? I need to do that first. You have these little chunks of plastic that from when we broke it. Don't want those floating around in there. Okay, that should work. Okay, so now we'll put this one right there. We'll put this one right there. And they kind of, the way they're built, they actually have, they're not locked on, but they have a ridge in there that kind of holds them in place. And all the insides of these tapes are all a little bit different. Sometimes they'll have a whole nother post right there that it runs around before it hits the wheel. This one doesn't. Like I said, the type that you would buy from a record company were usually made pretty cheap. So it's common for these things to look cheap and to not have all the little bells and whistles that some cassettes did. So then you would do that like so. Man, I loved this album so much. The producer on this album was a guy named Dieter Dierks, and he was this really well-known producer back in Germany. And then when he started working with the Scorpions, I think he started working on it with them back when they did the album In Trance. But I don't want to get too off, but which is a really cool album. And that was before Matthias or whatever Jabs started playing with them. And then he just stayed with them. And then he kept working with the Scorpions, and he actually produced I think every album up until this one, and even after this, Love at First Sting. And then he went on and he started working with Accept. If you ever heard the song, the album Restless and Wild, I think he did Balls to the Wall with Accept. They were just awesome. He did Twisted Sister, Come Out and Play. He did one of my personal favorite 80s albums and bands, which was Black and Blue, did their first album. Anyway, the guy was super talented, but he was the guy that produced this album. I loved Blackout, was so great. So this little sheet or this gasket, sometimes it'll kind of hold itself in place, but a lot of times as you do this, it'll fall off. We'll see, it's staying. It's almost like it creates its own little vacuum seal. And then it should just kind of fall into place. But because we broke it and some of the plastic got bent around, it may not work quite the way we expect it to. But you don't want to, if you're forcing it into place, then something's not lined up. So you shouldn't ever have to do that. But I can't, but this tape is not wanting to set back behind the little teeth there. Okay. But this guy's challenging me. Oh goodness. And this is the other thing. It's also really smart when you're doing this, and this is actually an example of it, not only to kind of pull it tight, but to make sure that you're working with the leader. Because if we were actually in the oxide right here instead of the leader, it is so flimsy. The leader can be hard enough to get lined up, but the oxide tape is worse. So always, whenever you're fixing a tape like this, as much as possible, try to be at the leader. Now, that's not always possible because a lot of times the tape will be broken in the middle of the tape. What are you going to do then? Well, you can't do much, and so you just work with what you have. But if we're doing something like this where there was a mechanical issue, sometimes, and I didn't point this out, but you'll see right there, there's a little, what looks like a little round thing right there. That you'll see how that's how the leader is attached to that reel. These were manufactured in different ways. This was the way that lasted the longest, but some of them you'll see these big, almost like big sections that with I don't know how to explain it, but there's a bigger piece of plastic in there, and then this leader sticks behind it. Those things will actually crack over time and just break, and then there's just nothing. And so we'll have to open it up and replace those things, and we have bags of those things just to replace for that very reason. So sometimes you do have to break these open. Sometimes you have to break them open because the break is in the is somewhere in there, but if you have to open them, it's usually best for that reason because it helps you line it up. Let's see if I can close this again. There we go. Now, make sure the reels are in the right place. There we go. So, and sometimes again, because the tape is or because the plastic got a little gunky, goofy, some spots will be a little harder to, no, I didn't have to do anything really. Like that actually lined up just fine. So other than being a little bit beat up, that's exposed, that it actually doesn't matter. So we can, as far as breaking tapes go, that actually was pretty smooth. We've seen some pretty rough stuff, as you can imagine. And then it's really this simple. You take a little piece of tape, Scotch tape like that, or whatever tape you got, put one on that side, put one on this side, bam. And Scorpion's Blackout is ready to play again. And this will work if we were pretending that I just did some sort of a fix. This tape will now work just fine. And again, we've got it on vinyl in the other room, so we don't really have a need to ever play this thing. But that's what you do. If you have to break open a cassette tape that's sealed shut, that's the process. Hey, of course, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave any feedback you have if there's other things you'd like to see us do here, or if you just want to make some comments about the Scorpions and how absolutely amazing this album was. I love talking about this stuff. So anyway, have yourself a fantastic day.